In my career writing game reviews, something has made itself abundantly clear. The indie market is very interesting. If you happen to be strapped for cash, no problem. You can find a good time on Steam, IndieDB, GameJolt, or a variety of other sites for free 99. If you're willing and able to shell out a few bones, once again you can count on Steam, but also the PSN, the Xbox Marketplace, and the Nintendo eShop are reliable if you're more of a console gamer. Hello and welcome back to Indie Impact, where I'll take a casual glance at some indie titles that can be found on one or more of the aforementioned platforms, discussing their pros, cons, and letting you know if they're impacts or setbacks. So, without further ado, here are today's selections. In the Yuletide-themed visual novel A Winter's Daydream, the main character, Yu, comes home for the new year after having attended university in Tokyo for 8 months. Immediately, he comes across as the kind of character whose youthful naivety causes him to look down on anyone living in the town where he grew up, but it's less arrogance and more cynicism. In time, we learn the relationship between Yu and his sister Otoko is strained, for lack of a better term, so to escape from what should have been a relaxing holiday vacation, he plans a visit to their grandmother, a widow living out the rest of her days in an even more dilapidated town. I'd like to abstain from spoilers on the off chance anyone watching would like to read this kinetic novel firsthand, so instead I will focus on the execution of this concept. I really appreciate the attention given to the visual elements such as character design and UI, the sprite design by Neo, the BG art by Nuge, the CGs by Saizen, and the interface by DS Sans all come together to deliver the seasonal theme promised by its title. In my opinion, Ebihime's dialogue here could use some work, as many of the characters came across as blocky and lifeless to the point where I wondered if the story was lost behind a language barrier. I didn't see any translators in the credits, so I think it's safe to say it was initially written in English, however. Let's look at the pros of A Winter's Daydream. It has a sickeningly sweet and wholesome story about reconnecting with family before it's too late, which by the end had me contemplating the inevitable marching of time. It has an excellent soundtrack that reminded me of a cross between Undertale, the Persona series, and Clannad. Now let's look at the cons of A Winter's Daydream. As I said, the dialogue at times can be blocky, and there were times I couldn't imagine actual people saying certain lines, which made me thankful there is no voice acting, to put it lightly. In the credits, there are a couple of proofreaders, which tells me there was an attempt to ensure there were no typos or grammatical mistakes, but there were still enough that I seriously began to wonder if I should market myself as a copy editor for VNs. It's a kinetic novel that touts around 50,000 words, or approximately 3 to 4 hours of reading, which wouldn't be an issue if there was a way to save your place in the story, which there is not. It doesn't have a save feature, nor does it have a method of seeing lines you missed, both of which are necessary staples in this genre. I may have been willing to shotgun the entire thing in the course of a day, but trust me when I say there are a lot of people who are not. A Winter's Daydream is developed by Ebihime and published on consoles by Sometimes You, who provided me with a key for the PS4 version, and is available via Steam, PS4, Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch, all for the price of $5.99. I am gonna say that A Winter's Daydream is a setback, with the understanding that it's not a terrible experience, but between the lack of a save function, the blocky dialogue, the typos, and the chunk of unattributed dialogue towards the end, makes me confident this game could use an update or two. I am aware it's been available for a while, though, and if it hasn't been updated yet, it likely won't be, so take from that what you will. In a previous episode of Indie Impact, I did a segment on Raised, a speed-based platformer that easily earned its Impact status thanks to the challenging but very fun gameplay. I called back to that episode here because the second game on today's agenda takes everything I thought was fun about Raised and burns it to the ground. Crashbots lets you play as a state-of-the-art fighting robot tasked with testing endurance, agility, and firepower in a series of linear courses that rarely differ from each other. In each course, there are various items to collect, such as stars, which act as your rating for the course, lightning bolts, and battery packs, which help to fill your ever-draining power, and coins, which I can't for the life of me remember the purpose of. In my opinion, the game looks fantastic. It was developed by a one-man game studio, which says a lot when taking into account the impeccable visual design and sound, but where Raised presented a significant challenge that I felt would reward me for my effort, the same can't be said for Crashbots. If the courses were to change in some way, like if they were to incorporate turns into the formula instead of sticking exclusively with straight hallways, I might feel differently, but considering it looks as if the structure of the game remains a static rail shooter with unforgiving difficulty throughout, I get the feeling this one isn't my cup of tea. Let's look at the pros of Crashbots. It looks really good. I dig the hybrid, cartoony, three-dimensional aesthetic they're going for, and as I mentioned, the sound design is fantastic as well. I have to applaud the sheer girth of this game. I said the game's core is static, but if you discount the fact that nearly every level is identical, there's an impressive amount of content, especially when you consider it's made by a one-man team. Now, let's look at the cons of Crashbots. It looks like a mobile game. In fact, according to the game's website, that's exactly what it was until they reworked it for consoles and PC. It's possible my grievances could have been addressed had that been the framework for my experience with this game. If I had started playing on my phone when I was seeking a mindless time sink, it might be slightly more tolerable. Instead, I decided to play the console equivalent to Super Mario Run, and now I feel disgusted with myself. In my opinion, this is the video game adaptation of sensory overload. There are too many factors to pay attention to, and if you happen to miss one, your entire run is ruined. I would be less annoyed if the process of redoing the course was a little more streamlined, but it feels super clunky and unintuitive. I understand making games difficult, and a lot of y'all might be telling me to get good right about now, but I would rather get good at a game I actually enjoy playing. Crashbots is developed by Neon Chimp Games and published on consoles by Sometimes You, who provided me with a key for the PS4 version, and is available on Steam, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch for $9.99. I am gonna say that Crashbots 2 is a setback as a console game. I could be persuaded to play it in my off time on Switch, but I simply can't justify spending more time on the landlocked console version. It's not a game where I would strive to reach the end for some kind of closure or satisfaction. It's, at best, a game I would play while waiting in line. I began Indie Impact so I could get the opportunity to play games I might not normally get the chance to, and every so often I stumble upon a legitimately good game hidden amidst the refuse. In the case of Ink, developed by Zach Bell Games, that's exactly what happened. It's not necessarily the most original concept in the world. You can see similar gameplay in titles such as Super Meat Boy and Celeste, but Ink takes things one step further. You awake within an empty void, and through trial and error, you're able to paint the stage until the method of getting from point A to point B is revealed. It's a game that reinforces the idea that you're gonna die many times, but they don't punish you for that. In fact, no matter how many times you shift off this mortal coil, the amount of the level you painted remains constant. It's not perfect by any means, however. If I unlocked a trophy and wanted to check it out, I would notice these strange visual artifacts attached to the character and world that would only go away once I hit the PS button twice, once to exit the game, and again to get back to the game. I noticed at times when I tried to double jump, the game thought I was trying to single jump, which would often result in an untimely demise. I am unable to tell if that's a glitch or a feature. Let's look at the pros of Ink. It's a legitimately fun game that provides a significant challenge. It's the kind of game that I can see myself playing mindlessly until 5 in the morning, stopping only after checking my phone and seeing that it's 5 in the morning. It's aesthetically pleasing. Not only are the visuals striking, but the audio design as well. I was able to vibe with the soundtrack as I fell into the chasms and spikes. Now, let's look at the cons of Ink. It is hellishly difficult the further you progress. I know I said its difficulty was a good thing, and I hold true to that, but there's an insane difficulty spike after arriving in the third world. It got to the point where I had to walk away. I may end up returning to Ink, but it may be some time before I do. I am not the biggest fan of how uncontrollable the player character can be. I would sometimes have trouble staying put on a platform once I landed. It was almost as if the dev incorporated slipping and sliding mechanics into an Ink-based platformer. Ink is developed by Zach Bell Games and published by Digerati Distribution, who I think is responsible for offering me a key for the PS4 version. I say think because it's been a hot minute since I was given the key, and there's no way to figure out who actually sent it, so it will remain an unsolvable mystery. In any case, it's available via Steam for $4.99, PS4 and Xbox One for $9.99, and Switch for $8.99. I believe the challenging and addictive gameplay, added with the attractive visuals and soundtrack, make Ink an impact. It's a unique twist on the platformer genre that'll have you trying and failing and trying again and failing again until you look up at the clock and, as it turns out, you've been playing for 6 hours straight. You have been warned.